but I think it was 2003 that a certain blonde came onto the scene. Cue Elle Woods. It was the first film I ever bought as a DVD.
True.
And I watched it obsessively. That was it. I'm going to be a lawyer. You know what? I'm just going to put a load of scattergun approach to these training contract applications, get them out there. And, you know, one will come good, right? Instant rejections.
You ranked today as number one legal linked influencer in the UK, which is just amazing.
I channeled my inner Elle.
Hi, I am Simon Marshall and I'm the founder of TBD Marketing, which is a legal marketing agency, as you probably know by now. And this is the podcast, But Is It Legal? And today I'm super excited to have one of the superstars of the legal sector on LinkedIn with us as well. This is Jen Shipley.
Hi everyone, lovely to be here.
Jen, please can you tell us a bit about who you are and where you work and what you do?
Perfect. So I'm Jen Shipley. I'm a senior associate solicitor at Irwin Mitchell Solicitors. For my day job, I specialise in medical negligence. And yeah, I'm just worked at the firm. So I'm just skipping through, but I'm just so excited to tell you about my life. I've been at the firm for 12 years approximately now. So basically been all the way through. So that's a little bit of a potted history about where I've been, aka one firm.
So one firm for the whole of your legal career?
One firm for the whole of my career.
Tell me a bit about that, because you came through a different route to some other people who might come to the law. So
yes.
Tell me a bit about how you arrived at the law.
Yeah, so I think I was always naturally drawn to the English related, the arts subjects. I was awful at maths and sciences, awful. My dad's an accountant and he used to sit there for hours with me just going through equations. He was so patient. And he would, we think we'd get it. And then all of a sudden it would just be like, no, Dad, we are definitely not getting this. And I'm going to have a big fit and a cry and it would all end really badly. And he'd start again and we'd all patiently go. But it was very clear that I wasn't going to go do the sciences. And so I lent into, history,
right,
politics, English. And it was actually, I'm going to get told off now if this is the wrong year, but I think it was 2003 that a certain blonde came onto the scene, cue Elle Woods, who everyone will know, I'm sure, as being the female protagonist of Legally Blonde. It was the first film I ever bought as a DVD.
True.
And I watched it obsessively. I just was enthralled by Elle Woods and her journey and everything about her and the fact that she was just herself, unapologetically herself. And she made it in the industry when the odds would, be against her in terms of someone that looked like her, that was like her. And I just thought, you know what, I want to be like that. And she was actually really herself as well. She didn't necessarily meet the corporate mold. Well, she certainly didn't meet the corporate mold, but actually she was just amazing. And she was so inspirational. And I think she really inspired a generation. So that was it. I'm going to be a lawyer. I was really into it. And then I went to university,
right,
dropped out of university studying English because I didn't think I'd get the grades to study law. Cue tears. Then I took the rest of the year as a gap year, went back and went to Cardiff Uni and ended up doing my law degree. And then,
which is a great law faculty, right?
Great. It was really good. And it was actually, I did better in my results for A-level than I thought I would, which was great. But I was still really, I suppose I just was a bit naive. I just didn't really prepare any applications. No, I was enjoying uni. It wasn't, the access to resources such as LinkedIn or other things weren't what they are now. It's very much like you have to take it upon yourself, or you have to potentially have connections or all of that stuff. And I just didn't have that. Sort of sense of direction at the time. I was, I probably put in a couple of half-hearted applications, instant rejections. And then, I actually remember just thinking that, I really can't do this. Like, I don't think I'm cut out for this. No one wants me. I started to then apply more for paralegal roles because I thought maybe that's the foot in the door type situation. And then I just remember it was around Christmas 2012 and I just saw this job online for a paralegal role at Irwin Mitchell, my current firm, and I just put in a covering letter. I mean, they don't really do covering letters anymore. It's much more.
It's all done by AI
it's all
now,
done
I think.
by online, or you do your kind of videos and things like that, which is great, to see a bit more about people. But I did a covering letter, did my CV, sent it off, and then really shortly after, I got this call to say, "Would you come for an interview?" Oh my gosh, I was so scared.
Right.
It was the biggest building I'd been in terms of massive building, Owen Mitchell in Birmingham.
Right.
I remember going up waiting in a waiting area, and I was just so petrified. And I sat there like, have I got anything down me? Am I just going to make a really big idiot of myself here? So I remember went into the interview, seemed to go okay, better than I'd thought this catastrophe would turn out. And came out, and I was thrilled to be offered the job, and it was in the international personal injury team, and it was I actually started managing cases quite early on, and it was really good. Difficult, not going to lie, because it was hard to actually come from being in an academic background to just all of a sudden being in a law firm setting, a professional environment. But it really set me up from paralegaling was an amazing thing to do. And then I actually just thought, okay, I'm going to start applying again. I feel like I've found my feet here. I really think that maybe I could start applying for training contracts. Cue all of it, the stress associated. And this is a big thing. It features a lot. I'm sure we'll come on to it. My content on LinkedIn is very much about the fact that at the time I felt so alone. So I was just making these applications myself, feeling as though I was just a bit aimless, wasn't really targeting things in the right way, was very much just thinking, I'm just going to put a load of scattergun approach to these training contract applications, get them out there, and, one will come good, right? Roll. About 100 applications later, over like a couple of cycles, and I really was losing hope.
Yeah.
I just didn't think it was for me. So many times I wanted to give up. I really just felt maybe this is where my legal career ends. And then I made an internal application to Irwin Mitchell. And, I went through the assessment centre in the same way. It's the same process. And they took a chance on me. And that was 2014. I was offered it. I think it was for the year later. So for 2015. And that was a real massive turning point for me, but that's the happy ending. That's the yes, the one yes.
But that's quite a long period.
It's quite a long period.
In which you were thinking, is it for me?
Absolutely.
Is it going to be right as well?
Absolutely.
And your dad had been an accountant, but there wasn't
Yes.
anything there that you could model on, or how to kind of apply or go through the system. You didn't have a role model in the legal sector already that you could turn to.
I didn't. I mean, my dad's one of those annoyingly good people that can just turn his mind to anything. He was really good at essays at school, and he used to help me out with the university stuff, but no one in the legal sector that I had to actually turn to, really. I didn't have any connections. I felt as though I was really having to forge out and find that niche myself.
Yeah.
And I think I found that it was just increasingly, it's such a competitive profession, and I'd get rejections back. They wouldn't spell my name right. Most of the time I wouldn't even get a rejection email back. It felt very generic. You felt like you were a number, and you are a number. And that is the truth of it. It's not to put people off applying to enter the profession. It's just to understand the realities of it and the fact that it is tough.
Yeah.
And, we see these perfect TikTok accounts sometimes, or these journeys that actually are like, how did I make it to this magic circle firm? Here are all my hints and tips. That's not to belittle that, because that's amazing if they've had quite an easy run of it and they've but there is an element of that, of right place, right time, or there's an element of luck in any of this as well.
Yeah.
You have just got to pip that next candidate to the post, and maybe it's fine lines, right? So the difference between getting it and not getting it could just be how someone performed slightly better than you on the day, or it could just have been they slightly preferred another candidate. And it's having to switch my mindset for being that I'm not a failure. It's not that I'm not cut out for it. I just need to it wasn't my time.
Yeah.
And I got that a lot, and it's hard. It was hard, and it was demoralizing, and my God, I cried so many times.
Yeah.
It felt like a constant cycle of rejection, but it did feel as though I think now, probably with the benefit of hindsight, I see that single one of those rejections got me one step closer, because every time I tailored something, I tweaked it.
Yeah.
I changed my application. I learned from my experiences. And I think
That's like the trait of being a good lawyer, right?
well, I don't know.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Iterating, redlining,
exactly.
going again, resilience.
Exactly. Resilience. Like, it massively taught me that.
Yeah.
You know, I went from being someone that was probably would have given up quite easily. Just, you know.
Clearly not.
But that's what I traditionally thought myself was. I found an inner strength. It was that grit that really got me through.
The inner Elle.
The inner Elle. I channeled my inner Elle, and, you know, it was funny. We joke about it, but I did watch that movie so many times, and, you know, you draw upon things. I really just turns things, you know, actually Erin Brockovich, another big, someone amazing, where you can just turn to and think, she didn't take no for an answer.
No.
And, you know, it really did reach the stage so many times when I just said to my parents, that's it. I can't do it anymore. I've just got to, this isn't for me. I'm not good enough. And I genuinely believe that, but something kept me going. There was just something inside of me that just said, but you know what? There is a passion there, which is half the battle, right? Because we all have this feeling of, you know, I would say some people fall into their careers, other people are much more like, okay, this is where I want to be. I definitely knew that's what I wanted to be.
Right.
And so I've got that counts for something. And I really just had to listen to myself and trust my instincts and think, and it get me through it. And I think that resonates a lot with when I see aspiring lawyers in, you know, a lot of them contact me on LinkedIn, either directly through comments, things like that. And I just think, firstly, it's amazing that we're now in an age where LinkedIn is accessible for everyone and that it's available, because before it just wasn't a thing when I was back applying. There was no resources, there was no people to connect with. And now it's almost like you've got an inbuilt network that you can tap into, and people will give you the time of day as an aspiring lawyer.
You say that. I think what's interesting for me is that so Trevor Sterling, who has topped the rankings this quarter for the legal linked influencers from the leader's perspective, is a friend and a client as well. But he talked about being the ladder.
Yeah.
And when I think of being the ladder, he definitely does that. And I think you do too. I don't think you ever lose sight of the fact of how hard it was for you.
Yeah.
And I think that my experience of you is that you make generous allowance with your time to help other people as well through the process.
Thanks. I'd say that's been the most important thing for me, and also why I feel it's made me the lawyer I am today, is that because I haven't lost sight of where I've come from and the journey I've had, and that actually I've used that journey and utilised it to help me become a better lawyer. So all of these skills I learned as a paralegal, you know, it's easy to say. I think we're thankfully slowly, hopefully, starting to move away from the narrative that paralegals are just support staff, or paralegals are, you know, like everyone wants to move on from being a paralegal. It's just a stepping stone. Now we've got lifelong paralegals, career paralegals, who are actually so incredibly valuable to a firm. They couldn't function without them. And I think, you know, it's moving away from this whole thing of, we have to be qualified as a lawyer to actually be a solicitor, else no one's going to take you seriously. I mean, Silex, my husband, went through that, and it's an amazing process that it provides so much more accessibility for people. But I think it's just understanding that everything that you've been through shapes who you are. And I think it's not even about me having to kind of consciously do it. I just think that I'm in a position of where I'm able to now look back. You know, I've climbed through a few rungs up the ladder to get to, you know, various positions in my firm. But I'm almost got that unique perspective now to be able to look back and to think, okay, well, what can I do to help the next generation? Because actually that's something that I can offer, and I'll do anything I can to try and help, even if it's just small little nuggets, hopefully of wisdom, but more just, encouragement more than anything. I don't profess to know how to write the perfect application. I don't sit there doing, CV writing classes, because that's not my forte or what I'm, particularly good at. It's more that I am able to build those skills and that platform to enable people to ready themselves for this journey. And if that's building resilience, if that's just encouraging them to take that further step or to just go again, that's where I probably see my strength.
I'd say you do that. And the other thing I've really noticed is that you're incredibly good at lifting up your own team internally. I think you always recognise like the paralegals or the juniors or the trainees in your team as well, and you have a lot of authority on the platform, given the size of audience you've got nowadays. And what's that line? There's a joke, isn't there? I mean, Guns N' Roses, they say, don't mess with people on the way up because they'll mess with you on the way down, right? And I think you kind of exemplify that idea of like, I'm going to look after people. I've been that ladder, like, Trevor was talking about. Okay, so tell me a bit about what are we dealing with in terms of numbers here? Because I mean, you've ranked today as #1 legal linked influencer in the UK, which is just amazing, right? I mean, with power comes responsibility. So I don't know what it means next for you, but tell me a bit about that. What does it feel like having this kind of constant drip of notifications coming through for Jen Shipley?
No, it's it's really lovely. I think the first thing to say is, I know the typical line is, it's not about the it's not about the followers, it's not about the rankings, it's just kind of about the content and what you do from it. And that is true. It really is true. But at the same time, it's lovely recognition. And it's also quite nice for myself just to see, from a comparison for my own kind of progress, how I'm getting on with it and how I'm doing, and that I'm resonating. And it's a stat, isn't it? It's a marker of how you're kind of resonating with people to a degree, which I think is really good and helpful. At the same time, I think it's putting it into perspective and understanding that it is what comes from it and what you're able to offer. And sometimes I always think that, it might be the post that doesn't actually generate the most impressions or, likes or comments, but actually it just takes that one person to message you afterwards and say, you really got me at the right time with that one. I really felt that was, I was having a really bad day, or I was wanting to give up, and that one resonated with me. And that means so much more than anything. And equally on the flip side, from a business perspective, which I think is, let's face it, this is what LinkedIn can be amazing at, is forging those connections, but also bringing business to whatever you're doing. And the amount of people that will approach me through the platform just because they've seen my content and they feel as though they've got to know me that way is amazing. And it really does spur me on and encourage me. And also, it's quite validating, because sometimes I do think, oh my gosh, I am pushing myself a bit here. This is quite personal stuff. What I feel I want to share. So I never feel there's a pressure to share anything beyond what I feel comfortable. I set my boundaries. But still, I do step out of my comfort zone. I don't just rest on my laurels and think, okay, I'm just going to stick to safe topics here. I just really push it because that's what I feel like I want to do. But when you get messages off the back of that saying, I'm so glad you did that, that has meant so much to me, that's been really helpful, valuable for me, that's amazing. That's the best thing.
I hope you don't mind me asking, how does James feel about this kind of online celebrity? Because he obviously works at the same firm in a kind of adjacent department, as it were. But tell me about that. Do you have conversations about where that boundary is?
I'm very. I try and be as respectful as I can with my relationship with James in terms of communicating with him, and sometimes there'll be a post I want to make and it involves him, or there's a definite, this is our personal life,
right? And
I will run it by him,
right?
Not because he would think, oh no, you can't post that. It's a respect thing, right? It's being able to have that discussion and that conversation, because he's probably naturally quite different to me. He's not out there on LinkedIn, social media. I mean, he's my biggest supporter. He really does champion me. But at the same time, it's not his way. He's naturally, he's got fortes in other areas.
Right.
And I think it's understanding, and, we found a really good medium, like happy medium with it, where I just, if it's something I'm thinking that's a bit more personal, I'll just run it by him. And I would completely respect if there was anything that he said, I'd rather you didn't, because it's a balance, isn't it, to be had? But generally he's, I can't think of anything where he hasn't said.
It's nice to know you've got a veto,
Yeah.
right? I think even if it's a joker card rather than a veto, I think it's good to have that boundary somewhere as well.
Yeah.
So I think, and maybe you can share a bit about this as well, one of your superpowers on LinkedIn is your ability to stick to some content pillars, right? So I think that this advocacy for future lawyers coming through maybe alternative routes, or just to keep going when they need to. I think lawyers can struggle with that a bit, the idea of repetition, and they feel as though people are going to get bored with it.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about that, because you talk about it, 1 in 2, 1 in 3 posts is about that topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I've learned or found the balance with over the time too, because I've gone through that, exactly the thought process you've said there, Si. At times I've thought, am I just over-egging the pudding here? Am I just almost going too hard here? But actually, it's a big community, and you might have X amount of followers, but equally, it only takes someone to comment or someone to like it, and then it finds its way into a whole different network that you never even have been connected with anyone on. And it resonates with different people, different days. So not everyone will see your posts on one day. And also, I found that there are people which it doesn't matter whether it's a Monday that I've posted something similar to something on the Thursday, they needed that both days. And they might be in the midst of application season. They may have just got a myriad of rejections through their emails. They may just feel as though they're at a really low ebb. And it doesn't feel there's ever a limit on that. It just feels as though, I reframe in different ways.
Yeah.
I feel as though I tap into slightly different nuances. Yeah. So, be that about kind of rejection and the resilience, about the application process, my journey. I'm not afraid. I've shared quite regularly my journey into the profession, and I found that each time there's a different amount of people or different people that it connects with. So I think it's just not being afraid to feel as though the content you post don't feel it's repetition, or that it's treading old ground. It's tried and tested, and it's helping people. And I think that's the point, really, is that you can just kind of actually, the fact it's benefiting people, the fact you're getting the feedback on it, just lean into that.
I think that's really clever, isn't it? Because you think about it, we've got an incredibly intellectual profession.
Yeah.
And we think that when people logically get something, that's done, it's job done. It isn't, right?
Yeah.
What happens is that, as you just said, on a Monday they read it, on a Thursday they get it, right?
Yeah.
It's an emotional draw.
Yeah.
And I think that, let's take an example, like you got to do your will.
Yeah.
Did you do the will the first time you had to find out you were doing your will? No. Right? You didn't. It took you 12 or 15 or 20 times to get that message. And then something tipped you over into, I've really got to do my will.
Yeah.
And that's true of life admin. Sadmin, we call it around my way, right? Okay, great. So there's a big audience. You got some fans on there as well. Tonight we're going to talk about, I think you said something really interesting to me the other day, which is you haven't come across too much negativity.
Yeah.
How do you get that balance right? Because I think that's a bit of a different experience to a lot of people out there.
Yeah,
so
of course.
How does that come about, do you think?
Yeah, I think I've been thinking about that, actually, and I think a big part of it is the content you put out and the way in which you approach LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Very much dictates what you get back. And I have always tried to approach, even when I'm talking on some quite hard-hitting, difficult topics, I've always tried to approach things with a positivity, or, it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows, but at least trying to view that constructively or positively, whatever that may be that I'm posting. And I find that when I do that, invariably people respond to that in a positive way.
Yeah.
And I think that, there's going to be controversial topics that you can talk on, and you're going to always get people that will have a view that's contrary to yours, politics, things like that. There's very much it's very polarizing in some ways. It's not to stop people from saying that. I think that's important, and some people are really brave, they forge their way in speaking about it. But equally, I think that the positivity that you put out and the way in which you just really approach the platform is a massive part of that. And genuinely, I can say, in the years I've been on the platform, I can't think of, any serious trolling or people that have negatively hit back at me. And I think that's also says a lot about the platform, because I don't think that a lot of the platforms are like that these days. No. I mean, X, it just seems to be like there's a mass exodus from X, just because it's negative, quite a negative environment. Probably broad brushing it there and giving it, don't want to tarnish every single, because there's some really inspiring stuff on there. But I would say that it's a bit of a jumping on people, pile on mentality. And if someone puts a tweet out there, you only have to get someone that makes a sarky remark back or a negative remark, and then everyone's just getting involved. And I just don't see that in the same way with LinkedIn.
It's interesting. I think you're right, the degree of escalation is a lot lower, I think, on LinkedIn. So if it were going the wrong way, I think it can be contained. I think the proximity between your professional stance on it, here's my profile and here's my opinion, means we've got more at risk. And so I think that people behave themselves a bit better when you're hiding behind a username that's got nothing to do with that. It changes that debate. That said, I think, again, another one of your superpowers on there is that you are very generous with your vulnerability in your career journey. To do with what's going on with your great news at the moment with the baby. And then with baby loss as well over the last few weeks. So the stuff that we were talking about the other day. Tell us a bit about this certificate and what that's meant to you this kind of over the last few days, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for a bit of context, I suffered a miscarriage last November. And to be perfectly honest, before I fell pregnant, before I had the miscarriage, I really didn't know much about miscarriage. I didn't know any stats around it. I went into this pregnancy thinking this will result in a child. That at no point did it cross my mind that it was going to be any different to that. I also had a miscarriage, which basically meant that my body felt it was pregnant until we arrived at the scan at 12 weeks and I was told that the baby hadn't grown, basically. And that was an awful thing, because you go in, I always describe it as being, you're on the cusp of telling all your friends and family that this happy news, and then it went completely the other way and we were devastated, and loads of trauma physically and psychologically around that. But I made a conscious decision. Again, it kind of goes back to what you were saying very much with James's support, because it's private. That's a very private thing to go through. But I made a decision that it was really important. I couldn't just go back to posting on LinkedIn acting like nothing had happened, or even have a time off the platform feeling as though that didn't sit well with me. I just wanted to acknowledge it and really just share that. So I did. And, I posted about it shortly after that had happened. And, the overwhelming amount of support came from that. And, I've been quite vocal at various points as well since then about the journey. It's not just a case of sort of, you have the miscarriage, you have a bit of grief and then you move on. Actually, it's a recurring thing. And, it's been massively brought back. We've got happy news in that I've fallen pregnant again. I'm now 7 months pregnant. I almost will myself on 4 weeks then to 8, but no, we're definitely 7 months. And it's not a case of, okay, well, you have your rainbow baby on the way and then all of a sudden the other emotions switch off for the loss of the other one. If anything, it kind of draws that out a bit more. And so I've just sort of talked about that, kept that dialogue going. And in February this year, they basically introduced a scheme whereby you could actually register the death of a baby up to the age of 24 weeks, which was which is classed as a miscarriage, where before there wasn't any recognition of that. It was all just before, it was, after 24 weeks, it's classed as a stillbirth or a neonatal death. And that was massive for me, really psychologically. It's not, and I applied for it. It was a really easy process. And it wasn't the sort of thing where, I regularly look at the certificate that arrived through the post. It's just knowing it's there and just having that recognition of my baby was massive. But in February, the scheme was only for those babies that were lost post-September 2018. And I know that, the feedback at the time was, this is a great start, but, actually I wish that had been in place when I had my losses. That was quite a lot of women were saying that to me, and men as well, that we can't forget sort of the role that the fathers play in this as well, and the impact this has on them. And then actually sort of Baby Loss Awareness Week currently now, it started, it was Tuesday, and the importance of that was, I just was sharing, and then actually someone who commented on my post drew to my attention that the certificate scheme had been backdated. So it was now anyone in England can apply for a baby loss certificate. The only difference, I think, is prior 1992, I think it's 28 weeks is the limit. But other than that, it's an open scheme in terms of anyone can do it. And, I thought that was really important to share and clarify.
You'd recommend that other people who've gone through that baby loss might consider going through the scheme as well?
Yeah, and it's very personal choice. And I've also had feedback where people have said, I had a mix of emotions through it. And it's no straight, there's griefs, particularly with baby loss, is very, it's a very personal emotion, and it's hard to kind of know how you feel. But I think it's just knowing that people have that option. And if that's something that they feel would be helpful to them, I think that that's really nice to have that. And it's meant a lot to me. And, occasionally I'll just come across it, or, sometimes I'll consciously look at it. And it's just nice to feel as though I have that. And I think that that's just the sort of thing where people have actually then said to me off the back of posts, it's amazing, I didn't know about that, I'll apply for that now. Wonderful. And that really means a lot. So it's that sort of content that means the most.
Maybe there's a theme emerging here as well, and thank you for sharing all that. That's just amazing stuff. But about like what you do for a living, and I think how you are on the platform, and I think that there's no, please don't take that the wrong way, but I think that James Quarmby is the person I know who's closest to it, and he's stylistically closest to you, and subject matter couldn't be further away from you, right? He believes in the world of like looking after non-doms and making sure their status is preserved for the benefit of the tax status in the UK. But I think he advocates for his clients. Yeah. And in everything he does that as well. Yeah. And I think that is, again, one of your additional superpowers then that's got you seen rise up to number one, is this idea of showing up for your clients consistently with who you are and how you are. Yeah. You once said to me that, by the time these guys pick up the phone to you, they've already decided that you're going to be their lawyer. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that has been amazing, because I've seen that so many of my my current caseload, my past caseload, has been generated through LinkedIn referrals and or word of mouth from people that have, it's all kind of through the same thing. Yeah. But people will reach out to me, they'll drop me a message and they'll say, we didn't really want to just pick up the phone to a legal helpline, be that any firm, because that felt a bit impersonal to us, even though, they're lovely in all, in all companies. I'm sure they'd have a lovely experience as much as you can. I think they wanted that personal touch. And, I've had a case I could think of just, that really means a lot to me, where it was, the mum of a little girl who suffered a brain injury at birth or shortly after birth. And she just basically said, I've got a letter from the doctor, which effectively, the hospital are admitting that they did all these things wrong, and that, that's likely to have caused or contributed to our daughter's brain injury. And, to get that sort of raw, someone just kind of sharing that and just sending that letter to me through LinkedIn or, sending via email, because I just said send it on to my work, and I just think that was amazing. You know, you don't really get that kind of raw people just saying, I just knew that I wanted to come to you because you're just really human, and I just know you'll do a good job for our daughter. And that really gets me, actually. Every time when I feel that people are just, they've got to know me a little bit through my content, and then they felt that they can share that. And that's a big part of who I am, is being a human lawyer. And my clients are everything to me.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I love the job so much, is because first and foremost, you know, I can help people. And I know it sounds a bit generic, and, you know, people say they come to the law to help people. That really is the case. I mean, it's a privilege to be able to support people through some of the most difficult times of their lives. You know, it's not one that I take lightly.
No.
And that, you know, they open up to me. I feel like we develop trusting relationships, probably in part because we've got that platform from the start, you know.
Yeah, the newest group I've come across elsewhere are kind of divorce lawyers, I suppose. There's,
Yeah.
I call it threshold marketing, and it's worth kind of dwelling on for a minute as we wrap up, right? It's about meeting your client exactly where they are at the scariest point just before they instruct you.
Yeah.
And that's threshold marketing. If you can go there and take yourself there as a divorce lawyer, what's the scariest thing is, as a woman who's thinking about getting divorced, is walking through that door.
Yeah.
Because it becomes real and it's solid, and it's that. So anyone who can do that, or an employment lawyer saying, you've been told you're going to be made redundant, let's meet you at that doorway. And I think one of the things that you do again is meet people exactly where they are with their mental state, and then take them on that journey. It doesn't surprise me at all that people send you those kind of things. Listen, Jen, I'm really sorry we're out of time, and you've been a superstar for sharing all these amazing stories today. Thank you. If you've enjoyed Jen's voice, why wouldn't you, on today's podcast, please can you give her a follow. You're one of 100,000 people who does so, if that's the case, but you'll enjoy the content, I promise. If you like the podcast, share it with a friend, share it with a colleague. There's so many things you can take out of today's episode that I think are really good for you as a model about how to market yourself, about how to work as a senior associate within a firm, about how to be respectful of your client's kind of mental state, or where they are in terms of where you're going to greet them at the door, as it were. But either way, more broadly than that, please do watch the other episodes too, and subscribe to the podcast. Jen, thank you so much again.
No, thank you, Si. It's been a pleasure.